Hello everyone, and today it is time for me to talk about Big Brother 13, and this season was always a mixed bag at best for me, but I had it higher because I found the middle portion to be really, really great during my prior rewatches, but after watching it this time for this fresh rewatch and for this review, I'm definitely lower on it for quite a few reasons. For some reason, I'm always shocked at how entitled and insufferable the veterans are every single time I've rewatched the season, and it's even worse here. And the middle week, which is usually seen as the peak of the season, isn't as strong as I remembered, and some of the weeks are outright boring. So it didn't even really have a great, consistent set of weeks that made it enjoyable for me. And of course, the beginning and the ending of the season just suck. There's no way around it. And while the newbies aren't the weakest cast of Big Brother ever, I'm going to get to that very, very soon. And I believe I made a video on this earlier. And if you watched that one, you should know which cast I'm talking about. They're definitely not one of the stronger newbie casts, especially in the case of a mixed season like this, where it's mixed with veterans and newbies. So in general, it's just not a very strong cast in general. This season was definitely a combination of a lot of what I've talked about with the prior weeks with the production interference, the more scripted diary rooms, and the stronger emphasis on the pairs and the showmances, which we'll clearly see here since some of the most focused on pairs of this era came back here, and a lot of them dominated in the same way too. And it caused for the BB13 newbies to not really have much of a chance to develop as players or to really become their own Big Brother house guests to create a legacy for themselves, essentially. Overall, this season's just a frustrating watch, despite some of its good moments. Week 1 is a pretty standard week, in my opinion, and there really wasn't much interesting that happened, despite it being a split house during the week, but it was obvious how it was going to pan out, so you don't even really get an enjoyment of the newbies wanting to take over. So, regarding the intro puns, Dominic is a biker adrenaline junkie who lives with his mom. Cassie is a southern tomboy model. Lawan is a stylish, bold person. Keith is a youth minister who chases girls, and it's interesting that they showed these four first, since they get into an alliance, and we all know how this alliance performed or didn't perform. Anyways, Shelly is a businesswoman who is a part-time hunter, looks like a lady and acts like a man, works like a dog. That's her motto. Adam is a metal rock teddy bear who loves Beverly Hills 90210, which he references over and over again in the season. Kalia is the real-life Carrie from Six in the City who wants to meet boys and writes blogs and is obsessed with sex. And Porsche is a VIP cocktail waitress who is the hottest girl everywhere she goes. But unfortunately for her, she doesn't have the pizzazz of the cocktail waitresses of the past in Big Brother. So while Kalia talks about loving sex, Dominic talks about planning to be or to remain a virgin until he is married. Adam doesn't like religious people, so he was clearly supposed to conflict with Keith. Dominic wants to be taken care of by an older woman, and it pans to Shelley, which, okay. So they enter the house, and Keith lies about being a matchmaker because he wants more ladies, and he talks about Kalia's boobs. Porsche is crushing on Dominic, which is very interesting because apparently she and Danielle beefed about this after the season, which Danielle mentioned on the Big Brother 22 feeds since Porsche was allegedly hitting on Dominic after they got together, and I remember Porsche had to defend herself on Twitter during the season airing. Anyways, Porsche lies about her job because it is too luxurious, and Cassie lies about her job because models are seen as narcissistic. Julie tells them about the duo's twist, where they have to pair with someone, and the other person in a duo will be safe if the other person wins HOH, and a pair will be nominated, where one of them will be sent home, and the other who remains is given a golden key. Keith and Porsche pair up because he finds her attractive. Cassie and Shelley pair up, same with Dominic and Adam, as well as Kalia and Lawan, though Dominic and Clea are not pleased with their partners. The rookies immediately align before the vets enter, where Rachel and Brendan, who are now engaged, Jeff and Jordan, and the Donatos entered the house, where the latter mentioned that they haven't spoken in 3 years, so they would have fallen out in 2008, which is a year after the show. And from them being on good terms in Big Brother 9, To me, it seems like they fell out shortly after Big Brother 9. So Dominic talks about his future wife and calls her a hoochie mama, and it's clearly a recruit because he doesn't even know who either one of them are, and he thinks Dick and Danielle are dating. And Dick accidentally shades Jordan by mentioning that he's the only winner in the house. Rachel ends up putting the first HOH after making a deal with the Donatos for them to drop. The newbies are annoyed since they know that they will probably be picked off. The Golden Key twist will last for the first 4 evictions, which is ironic since Danielle wants to get the key to send her father home, but we all know the statement doesn't age very well for her, or doesn't age in the way that she would have wanted it to age. Brenchel talks about how they still hate floaters, with Dick talking to Jeff and Jordan about how they need to beat the strong Wookiees and to keep the weak ones. Dick and Danielle are talking about their strategy, and they realize that while they don't like one another, they get one another in a Big Brother sense, and they knew that they have to work with the veterans. Push tells Keith that they need to work with the veterans since Rachel will win the HOHs and Brenner will win the vetoes, and they will keep them safe, but Keith doesn't like this idea. Jeff and Rachel share the same sentiments that they need to work together as veterans. Dominic, Lawan, and Keith are vibing with one another, and they decide to work together while they bring in Cassie to the alliance. The veterans talk in the H&H room about how they need to get a few newbies on their side, and Dick shades Brenchel for somewhat understanding strategy since that was their weak spot last season, and they alienated everyone in the house, which he is definitely correct about regarding that read. And unfortunately, not a whole lot changes this season about that. We are so delighted to see a scene about Brenchel talking about procedures, where he tells Rachel that she doesn't need procedures at 26, especially Botox, and she's speculating about whether Cassie has Botox, and she mentions that Brennan doesn't complain about her fake boobs. Cassie and Dominic are speculating about who will be put up, where he thinks that it'll either be himself and Adam, as they are the only male group, or Porsche and Keith, since they did well in the HOH comp. They talk about having the numbers in their group, since they are all in separate groups and they will save one another. It's very ironic since this doesn't happen at all. The 4 of them agree to this and solidify their regulator alliance. Dick speaks to Porsche to get her on their side, and she has a conversation with Keith about how the vets are feeling good about them. For some reason, Keith throws her under the bus about how they will vote with the other vets, and his alliance are extremely pissed off, where they all mention that she's a gunner. But she doesn't seem to realize that since he's attached to her, this would affect his game as well. Clearly, these people haven't watched Big Brother 9 to see how throwing your partner under the bus like this doesn't help. Jeff, Dick, and Rachel talk about how Dick feels like he can get Adam on their side, and we do see them having a conversation, though Adam is just pretending to agree with what he is saying. Shelley bonds with Jeff and Jordan since they remind her of her husband and herself. Rachel speaks with Jordan about how she wants Keith out, and Dick tells them that Porsche will do whatever they say, but she also mentions that she is contemplating nominating Adam and Dominic. Rachel nominates Porsche and Keith for eviction. Porsche is shocked that she is nominated because she is working with the veterans. Keith feels really safe. Rachel wants to give Porsche a golden key, which is why the vets are confused as to why she's so emotional after being nominated, and it's revealed that the nominations are Evil Dick's idea. They tell her that she needs to throw the veto so she can get the key, or else she'll be a target every week, and they make fun of her being ditzy, since she's ranting about how she came in the house to compete. Keith is planning on throwing the veto since he wants to beat Porsche and wants the golden key, since he will have the regulators and the newbies' votes. Keith tells Cassie and Kalia that Porsche is going to flip to the vets if she stays, and Kalia asks him if he's going to talk to the veterans, and he says he refuses to, and this puts Kalia on his bad side. Dick is called to the diary room, and he is missing for hours, which worries everyone, until production gives Rachel a letter to read to the other Haskins about his departure, and Danielle is given the first golden key. We now know that Dick was pulled from the game due to his HIV status. Of course, the veterans lose their mind over it, even more than his own daughter, and feel like they have no chance in the game, where they all just come off as extremely entitled and whiny. Jeff has to convince them to come down and to not give up, and he's the only reasonable one in the situation. Keith made it known to the others that he's smiling and happy about it, which is just so not a good move. While I in general don't like Dick, I do really hate that we didn't really get to see him play in the season, since we don't know if he could have proven to be a good player socially, strategically, and competitively without America's player, or if he would have just flopped on his own. But now, we will never get the answer to that. but it did seem like he really helped formulate, or was the main formulator of the plan for the veterans, so it showed that he had some of that strategic inclination still, and was able to pull Porsche and somewhat Adam, so maybe he would have just continued on the momentum that he gained from Big Brother 8, but we know that when he gets very angry, he tends to lose it, but we will never have the answers to how he would play a second time or without America's player, so yeah. Keith, for some reason, decides to confront Kalia and Porsche in front of the other newbies due to the other reasons described above, and people are bewildered about whatever the hell he is doing, which is turning a lot of them off. The veterans check on Porsche to make sure that she's still willing to throw the veto, and she's willing to do it, since she wants Keith out more than ever. Both of the nominees are throwing it without the other knowing it, and Branchell ends up winning the veto, and it's clear that they're not going to use the veto, but they want to revel in their power a bit by making deals with people in the house, where the segment is played for laughs, but at least they're making more initiative, unlike last season. Obviously, the veto is not used. Keith and Porsche are clearly over one another, and the other regulators talk about how they want Porsche gone, where they should have the other newbies' votes, and all three of them have mentioned that Keith is playing a terrible game, so all of his allies don't really care for him on a game point of view. And of course, the veterans want to keep Porsche, but Jeff mentions that they need to get the votes. He is hoping on flipping Shelley and Cassie, though Rachel is skeptical of them. Rachel admits that the vets have secluded themselves from the newbies, so they're having fun with a bunch of the newbies to have fun and to make connections, and I think they were really doing this because they were all bored in the house. Brennan gets annoyed that Rachel called him Buki in front of everyone, and it causes an entire argument between the two of them, since it's a private nickname, and how she isn't the Vegas girl anymore, and he's going to become a doctor, and it's embarrassing. And it's just like, shut the hell up, Brendan. Honestly. We have more annoying content about this, where he's mentioning that he's trying to get into the medical profession, since somehow the nickname is going to affect that, which, whatever, and he's tired of being emasculated in general. Brennan speaks to Shelley about the vote, and Jeff wants to maintain the relationship that Dick established with Adam for himself. Cassie mentions to the newbies that they need to keep Keith over Porsche, since she really disliked Porsche, which wasn't really covered on the edit, and Shelley mentions that she's playing both sides. Keith is evicted in a 6-4 vote. Keith is a complete train wreck of a player and was horrible as a player and was kind of annoying to watch. He was always just doing way too much, way too fast. His content about trying to flirt with the girls got very old very quickly, and he just didn't know when to simmer down and relax, since his paranoia rubbed everyone the wrong way, and while he was still about to stay in the house, even if he didn't make it through the week and had the golden key, I think he would have put himself in a position where he would have been booted right after the golden key twist ended. And he was even starting to rub his own allies the wrong way. I don't have high thought about his strategic acumen, and he just didn't execute anything well, essentially. So, yeah. So, I kind of found week 2 to be more interesting than week 1, especially because the vets all had their own self-interest, and them trying to trick the others into their own interest was kind of interesting to watch, since they all weren't a united front. Well, they weren't a united front. And there's definitely some drama here in the week that made it more interesting. So Jordan wins the HOH competition, and the newbies are dealing with the aftermath of the Keith vote. Kalia was done with Keith after he called her out in front of the newbies, where she and Shelley are not going to reveal their votes. So I'm pretty sure that they will find out eventually. Rachel enters the room, and Cassie mentions that she is shocked based on how people feel about Porsche. As I mentioned earlier, she really didn't like Porsche, and Rachel mentions that some people like her before walking off. Cassie claims that she isn't going to be bullied, which I didn't see that as bullying, and Dominic ends up speaking to Jeff, where they're both claiming that they weren't told who the other side would be voting for. Rachel tells Porsche what happened in the other room, and Porsche knows that Cassie is going home soon. We see Kalia and Danielle whispering about the vote, and it's clear that the two are close, though it isn't prominent in the edits yet. Shelley and Adam talk about the vote, and she's comforting him, though she knows that she's one of the votes, and he thinks that Dominic is one of the votes, since he walked off. There's a lot of mistrust between Dominic and Adam, and Dominic claims that he or Cassie is the target, so they need to recruit Danielle. We see more of Dominic and Danielle interacting and flirting with one another, and he's claimed that it's just strategy. We get more awkward, tense Rachel and Cassie scenes as they were just uncomfortable with no one saying anything, and it's just the two of them in the kitchen. Brendan is walking around in his tight Vito suit, and he's playing with Dominic, and we rarely see the side of Brendan in general during Big Brother, so it's kind of refreshing. Adam decides to change his strategy and decide to align with the veterans, where he is honest about his vote, but sees that the newbies are a sinking ship, which he tells to Jeff and Jordan. Tradef are skeptical since they invited Adam in the alliance prior and he stabbed them in the back. Danielle and Dominic are speaking about how they can save him this week, and he mentions that she's the only person who can truly go after the veterans. Jeff and Rachel are speaking, where he wants Dominic gone and Rachel wants Cassie gone, so she's trying to convince Jordan to target her. Dominic makes his pitch to Jordan and claims that he wants to work with them, but they are clearly not the most receptive, though when Cassie makes her case to the pair, they are more receptive, since she says that she likes them over Brenchel. Danielle mentions that she wants Cassie gone over Dominic, and Jordan ends up nominating Adam and Dominic for eviction. Jordan states that Dominic is her main target, and she went with her gut instead of what her alliance wanted, which is an actual good, self-interested move for herself, which I wasn't expecting from Jordan. Dominic knows that he's the target, and he has to win the veto or else he is gone, and Cassie and Lawan try to cheer him up. Jordan tells Adam to throw the veto, and we see Porch and Rachel talking about how Cassie needs to go before the game becomes individual, and Rachel calls Cassie a flirter, which Cassie isn't, since she is in one alliance and she hasn't deviated at all, but Rachel just uses it as an insult even when that doesn't apply. Danielle tells Dominic that she's pushing for Cassie to go, but Jeff wanted him out, and he mentions that Jeff and Rachel are too loud-mouthed, which is definitely truth, and will sink their own games, which she agrees with. Danielle mentions that she wants to manipulate him into making her moves. Danielle and Rachel talk about how they both want Dominic to win the veto, since they want Cassie out this week. Rachel tells Jordan about Cassie being shady and how their alliance is secure, and Brendan of course supports this. Jordan mentions in the diary room that she thinks Rachel is exaggerating it. Jordan rants about Rachel and Jeff, and she reveals that she is trying to get Cassie on her and Jeff's side. Jeff is annoyed that they are putting pressure on Jordan, and he's especially annoyed with Rachel. Jordan tells Cassie that people are throwing her under the bus because she is pretty, and people are jealous, where Jordan says that Rachel is jealous. Cassie feels vindicated about not coming clean about her modeling career, since what's happened in her life pertaining stuff like this is already happening in the house. Rachel is ready to change the nominations if they win the veto, but Brennan doesn't want to do it behind Jeff and Jordan's back, and she relays the same thing to Danielle. Dominic wins the veto, despite Adam throwing it, and we have an argument between Jeff and Rachel, since she makes a comment about Jordan not trying hard in the veto. Jeff is annoyed because it made no sense that Jordan would take 2 weeks of slop when she wasn't close to winning the veto, and says it was stupid for Rachel to do the same thing. Rachel ends up storming off and crying in a bush, where Brennan has to console her. Everyone thinks that she looks like a lunatic and are making fun of her. Cassie knows that she is going to be the replacement nominee and is just dejected overall. Jeff continues ranting to Jordan and says that this is why people disliked her last season, so her doing the same thing and expecting a different result is insanity, which is definitely true. Brennan tells her that she has to make up with Jeff and Jordan since they could be sent home this week. Cassie and Shelley of course make their pitch, and Cassie mentions that Brennan and Rachel are going to stab them in the back sooner rather than later. And at this point in the season, Danielle, Rachel, and Brendan were a lot closer to one another than they were to Jeff and Jordan, and that kind of was the case and is the case outside of the house, if I remember correctly. Dominic vetoes himself and Adam off the block, causing Shelley and Cassie to be named the replacement nominees. Cassie essentially knows that she is a goner, and Jordan feels like her hands were tied. Shelley feels guilty because her aligning with the vets gained her self-safety, and that's probably why Cassie is going. Both Shelley and Cassie are very saddened, and Jordan feels bad. Shelley realizes that she has to lie to people, but she teaches her daughter that it isn't something you do in real life, and it's really eating her up. Cassie and Rachel have a conversation where Cassie wants to know what she did to Rachel, and she admits that she didn't like how she spoke to Porch, and people told her that Cassie wants her out. Cassie mentions that Rachel is sending her home because she's the female, and for personal reasons. Rachel mentions that Cassie didn't speak to them, rejected their deal, and that her gameplay is horrible. Cassie calls her catty, mentions how she pulled for her last season and didn't understand why people hated her, but now after playing, she now gets it, and mentions that Rachel is an ugly person inside. Rachel cries to Jordan since people talking about the public hating her is a weakness for her, as she made several comments about it this week and, well, in the future weeks. Jordan gives her some real advice, and Brendan is riled up. He decides to have a conversation with Cassie, and she conveniently mentions the deal, and he says that they didn't trust her, and thinks that she's full of it when she's swearing on her father. He mentions something about drawing pictures to help her out in a condescending way, and she calls him out for being extremely confrontational and condescending. Cassie is evicted in a unanimous 9-0 vote. So apparently Cassie got a very generous edit, as her hatred for Porsche and even Kalia got very nasty at times, and that was why Rachel didn't like Cassie, because she was defending Porsche. It didn't really seem like she knew how to campaign for herself to stay in the house, and while she was able to get herself in an alliance and was able to get in close with Jeff and Jordan, I don't know if she would have been able to have lasted long to begin with, especially since she knew nothing about the game and wasn't really picking up on it quickly in general. Overall, there's kind of just an ambivalent feeling about how I feel about Cassie as a player, and even as a character or a house guest. Don't really have much to say about her. Week 3 is definitely in the top 2 weeks of the season, as there's just a whole lot happening, and the Fed Alliance finally broke up, and this was obviously the end of the Paris twist. So, the season feels a lot more fresh by the end of the week. Dominic realizes that the regulators are in the running for being the worst alliance ever, and many people are talking about how Cassie went home because Rachel was jealous. Rachel wins HOH again, and of course the newbies are annoyed, since there are only 2 newbie pairs that are eligible to be nominated. Jeff and Brendan talk about how Dominic and Adam need to go on the block this week, and Shelly and Adam realize that they need to kiss butt since the newbies are losing power and the vets are winning power, and they're hoping that Kalia and Lawan go up since they aren't doing anything. Adam kisses butt to Brenchal and throws Kalia and Lawan under the bus as floaters, though Brenchal hasn't forgotten that Adam rejected their deal in week 1. Lawan speaks to the couple and makes the same pitch, though Lawan offers them absolutely nothing. We have a segment of people making fun of Dominic's snoring, but we do have the luxury competition, where Brendan is annoyed that Rachel helped Porsche, and Jordan wins the luxury competition, where she gets to choose 3 guests, and of course she chooses Jeff, but chooses Kalia and Shelly. This sends Brendan and Rachel into a huge tailspin of a meltdown, where they are arguing with one another and ranting about Jordan and Jeff, and to me it just shows that Jeff and Jordan have good social games with the newbies, and Brendan didn't. Everyone is complaining about the 2 of them, and Brendan rants about how he risked his PhD to be there, and he didn't even want to come back to the season, but he only did it for her. And it just shows the mentalities of the 2 showmances, especially with Brendan ranting about America hating them. So you can tell that the 2 of them were very insecure in between seasons, and more insecure due to coming back and knowing how they were perceived in the last season, the prior summer. Dominic speaks about how he wants to play with Brendan and Rachel since he knows that they are huge shields for him, and Brenchal rants about Jordan being so-called nice and sweet, so they are interested in the foursome of them, Dominic and Danielle. Dominic reports this conversation to Danielle and tells her about how pissed they are at Jordan and Jeff, where she talks about how the house is letting 2 showmances take things to the end. Dominic mentions wanting to backdoor Jeff and Jordan, and Danielle mentions that she wants to get them to backdoor Jeff. So she talks about how there's a divide between the showmances, and she's encouraging them to backdoor Jeff. Rachel and Brendan are skeptical of doing it this early, and Danielle doesn't like being the odd person out in the alliance of 2 showmances. Jeff does the same damage control with Brenchal and mentions that they aren't going after them, since Jordan could have sent one of them home last week, but they aren't thinking in that lens. Rachel nominates Dominic and Adam for eviction. It's ironic that Danielle essentially ruins her game due to rejecting this alliance with 2 showmances, and it's the same thing that Yvonne would do in Big Brother 18, but we'll get to that in due time. Dominic and Adam have a conversation since their backs are against the wall, despite not talking game with one another the entire season, and Rachel is eavesdropping on their conversation. Rachel enters to tell them that this is mainly a veto week, meaning that the veto determines what happens and who goes home in the week, and she's hoping to make a deal with them. Danielle and Dominic talk about the plan to send Jeff home, since Dominic is weirded out about Rachel making another deal, though they already made one previously. Rachel tells Danielle that Jordan still hasn't spoken to her, and Danielle is still pushing for Rachel to backdoor Jeff, which everyone is apparently talking about. Brendan has a talk with Rachel in the bathtub, where he is worried about Jeff and that they will probably not be friends after this, which is true from what I've heard about the two couples. Dominic speaks to the couple about the same talking points, though he mentions in the diary room that he is planning to shank them in 3 weeks. Jeff does not like that Danielle is spending so much time flirting with Dominic, who she knows he wants out of the house, and knows that Dominic wants him out of the house. Jeff talks to Jordan about how he doesn't trust Danielle and wants her gone soon, while is sick of her having such an easy ride. Danielle is told by Rachel that Dominic is throwing the veto because she told him to, and Danielle feels like she's talking to two walls, since Rachel and Brendan wants to have all of the options. After she leaves, Brendan tells Rachel that his gut is telling him that Danielle is trying to get all the vets out and to try to get them against one another. Jeff and Jordan come into the room and they all put together Danielle's game while using Dominic as a partner to control the game. Rachel mentions that she doesn't trust Danielle, Jeff, or Jordan. Brendan won the veto with the same word that he won the spelling veto competition last season with, and Dominic is hoping that they save him. Danielle and Rachel are speaking, and Rachel is suggesting that she uses the veto to get Lawan out, and this actually would be a good move for her. But Danielle says that it's a waste and Jeff needs to go, though Rachel is doubting trusting Dominic, because she shouldn't trust him. Dominic speaks to Shelley about hoping to be safe and is hoping to align with her, and they're plotting to get one additional person to be on their side. In addition to Danielle to cut the pairs. This is a mistake, since Shelley is very close to Jeff and Rachel, and she reports this out to Jordan, where she and Jordan realize that Danielle is the leader. Shelley and Jordan tell Brenshaw about what happened, and Jordan speaks about how Danielle is emotionless, as she sees it only as a game. Brendan mentions that he is hoping that they can be friends with Danielle after this, but she is doing too much. Brendan catches Jeff up about everything that has happened, so the two of them wants to go after Danielle next week, after sending Dominic home this week. Brendan does not use the power of veto. Danielle is enraged that Brenchel did not hold their end of the deal, and she has a confrontational conversation with them, since she's going to be pissed if Dominic ends up going, and Brendan doesn't get why she's so clingy to Dominic when he's going to turn on them. She feels left out in the cold, and she's arguing with Brendan about her trying to break up the veterans, and she mentions that she promised Rachel her loyalty on day 2, and she's been looking after them. Jordan and Kalia have a conversation about how she might have been a part of it, which Kalia denies, though we have a flashback of Kalia and Danielle plotting it 3 days beforehand. Jeff speaks to Dominic because he wants to know who started the idea to get him out of the house, and Jeff is pissed off that Dominic is lying about it, and Dominic is annoyed that Daniel's plan is causing him to go home. Jordan reports to Jeff about how Kalia feels like she and Jeff have been ignoring her, and Jeff wants to gather everyone to talk. Dominic tries to do damage control with Brenchel, since it was not his idea to backdoor Jeff, and Jeff is lying about how he wanted to keep Dominic, which was never Jeff's plan. Jeff argues with Dominic about how he's an accessory to murder due to supporting Danielle. Kalia and Brendan have a conversation where she's trying to clear the air because she made a deal with the veterans in week 1 and knows that they're icing her out. Brendan gets really hostile in the conversation since he knows that she is lying and claims that she is playing both sides, calls her a flirter, and that this is easier than rocket science. She calls him out for being arrogant, mentions that his gameplay worked for him the first time, being sarcastic, and he tells her to go wash some dishes. She snaps and opens the door to yell at him since people think she tells a bunch of conversations to everyone. This ends up with a huge house meeting and a house fight, which causes for Kalia to end up defending herself against the veterans since they know that she is with a plan to get Jeff out. Brendan calls Danielle Kalia's boss, which they did a lot in the season, and used other words that are very microaggressive. And Kalia is annoyed that he's supposedly understanding now, but he was being an asshole to her when they were speaking earlier. Jeff tells Kalia and Dominic to be mad at Danielle and to yell at her, not them. Rachel calls Danielle a snake in so many words. Danielle calls Rachel an idiot, and of course, Brendan lashes at her for letting two people take the fall for her. Danielle admits to the plan. Brendan continues yelling, and she tells him to shut up, and Jeff is confused as she is she's doing this plan so early in the season. What they didn't show is that Jeff ranted about how all of them were going to ruin him and Jordan somewhere by planning to send him pre-jury, since at this point they still weren't living together. So him and Jordan were going to use all this time to spend the summer together, and if one of them are booted pre-jury, they can't do that. But it's not anyone else's job to ensure that he and Jordan spend the entire summer together. Dominic is evicted in a 7-1 vote. I definitely feel like Dominic had a lot of potential, not only as a player, but as a house guest and a character. I felt like he was pretty solid at the diary rooms, and he was getting better and better at how to execute them, how to narrate, orate, and with being witty, and he was definitely picking up on the game, but he had so many things at his disadvantage. With the Paris twist, the veterans being in the game, there being very limited options, and he did choose the wrong allies. And I do think he definitely overplayed with Danielle, but he was definitely someone that I enjoyed during his short time on the season. And apparently, despite him not being a huge fan of the show overall, since at least he was able to find his wife on the show. But I definitely wish he returned to the game over Brendan, and I think the season would have been a lot more interesting had he returned instead. Week 4 officially starts the midpoint of the season, and from my recollection, this was a really great week. But after rewatching the week, it was a lot more boring than I realized. Of course, the HOH result and Danielle and Clea being the last two to remain after everyone in the house was against them was fun. Outside of that, the entire week was just pretty boring and mundane. So of course the vets and many of the newbies are happy that Dominic is gone, but Kalia and Danielle know that their days are numbered. It is an endurance competition, and everyone is rooting against Danielle and Kalia in this competition. Adam throws the competition immediately since he's loyal to the vets and the newbies think that he is with them. Danielle and Clea are cheering one another up since no one else is cheering for them, and it's cool to see them make it to the final two of the competition where everyone was against them. Brendan shades Kalia's curves for being the reason why she's doing well in these comps, though people with her figure usually don't do well in endurance comps. And Clea tends to do well in all the endurance comps in this season. Anyways, Danielle ends up winning the comp after Clea gives it up, and the entire house is worried, especially the veterans. Clea tries to genuinely make peace with Rachel, and the latter continues to make it into an issue, and she, as well as Brendan, lashes out at Clea, which is just another example of their poor social game. Danielle tells Jordan that she isn't going after her or Jeff this week, so Jordan doesn't believe it, which is fair since Danielle did try to boot Jeff a week ago. Brennan mentions that they still have Porth and Shelly, and Clea won't go to bat for Danielle. No one is happy about being in Danielle's HOH room, and Lawan speaks to his story about being a gay man to Shelly and Jordan, where he came out and they knew it, where it's just a nice story and scene. And it's ironic that Jordan mentions that she's so accepting when Jeff had a Dumbledore meltdown in the first week on the live feeds, stating that believing that gay people should not watch after children. Both Trementis attempt to make amends with Danielle, and they mention that they were all hurt, so they should work together. Brenchall mentions that they are willing to forgive and forget, and hope that they can be friends after the show. Danielle nominates Brendan and Rachel for eviction. Brendan is planning on winning the veto to take Rachel off the block, and Danielle reveals that her target is Brendan, which Rachel predicts, and if Brendan comes off the block, it will be Jeff as the replacement nominee. We have a bunch of crying and sulking from the couple, since they know one of them will be at home, and they will be separated for the longest that they have since knowing one another, but they will be together forever. Jeff and Jordan do not feel safe, since one of them will be up, but they know that Jordan will be the safer person to nominate and stay in the house. Danielle apologizes to Rachel to smooth things over, and it doesn't really go over well, where she isn't trying to make it personal, but also mentions that she feels attacked when Rachel made deals with Dominic and herself, broke it, and told Jeff about it. Rachel says that Danielle is mad that Dominic is taken out because of her bad game, and is taking it out on herself and Brendan. Jeff does not intend on using the veto if he wins, despite what he told Brendan and Rachel, and he mentions that he will be nice to Danielle, but he will backdoor Danielle the first chance he gets, which he does. Brendan wins the veto and is hoping to keep using it on Rachel as a secret, so Danielle can scramble for a replacement nominee. Jeff and Jordan are worried since one of them are going to go up. Kalia and Danielle are sketched out by Shelly after speaking to them, though they realize that Jordan would make a good pawn. Despite Brendan's best efforts, Danielle plots with Jeff and Jordan about nominating the latter, as they're expecting Brendan to use the veto on Rachel. They try to fish it out of Brendan, but he doesn't tell the pair what he's going to do with the veto. Brendan and Rachel pitches for Danielle to put up Lawan, so they can all start over, but she mentions that no one will vote Lawan out. Brendan takes Rachel off the block, and Jordan is named the replacement nominee. Rachel cries her eyes out since he's going home, and he's happy to be her knight in shining armor, though he still thinks he tricked Danielle. People are shocked that Brendan did that, and Jeff is annoyed since Rachel annoys him, while Brendan is workable. Kalia and Danielle are really happy since Brendan is the one she's afraid of, not Rachel, and tells Kalia that she needs to win HOH next week. Brendan campaigns to push Shelley and Adam to stay, and uses Danielle as a campaigning tool, and Danielle is also campaigning for Jordan to stay, even convincing Push to not give Brendan a pity vote, since she's friends with the pair. Porsche tells Rachel that she cannot keep moping around since it's a poor social mood and it's making everyone feel uncomfortable. And Rachel has a huge meltdown because it's clear that Brendan is going home, and she shows all of her insecurities about how America is going to hate her even more, how he chose the wrong girl to marry and sees the veto on, and how she's not going to get a job. So unemployment is something that she was dealing with over the last year. I do think she was also insecure due to the cheating scandal that's happened between seasons, and she wasn't expecting to be hated after BB12. So I think a part of her was worried that he would cheat on her again since they would be away for 6 weeks. Danielle mentions in her HOH chats that her regret was turning on the vets 2 weeks too soon, so she was saying that she should have waited until week 5 to do it, which I guess makes sense. Brendan is voted out in a 5-2 vote. Brendan is a lot more arrogant and unlikable in the season, and yet again, he only goes after women. Whatever potential I felt like he had as a player last season went away this season. I don't recall him specifically and him solely making additional relationships that would help himself and his allies out, and you could tell that he didn't even want to be there since he was playing for Rachel to win, and all of his moves were to set her up, and he really was kind of pulled by his ear by Rachel to appear on the season. He was still mainly focused on competitions and hating floaters. And what makes it even worse is that he comes back, so the eviction and turning on the vets is essentially all for null for the next few weeks, so it doesn't even land. Week 5 continued the Danielle and Kalia streak, and while there were definitely some good moments in the season, in the week that made it more interesting than the prior week, it was almost just as frustrating, especially with the twist that was looming over the week that they conveniently decided to do now. And they decided to create just in case a veteran happened to have gone home pre-jury. And the way they set it up is that they have to do a vote, meaning that there was a higher chance of a vet getting voted back in to compete than the other newbies who intentionally didn't have much screen time. The house guests are told about the twist where the person evicted in the next week will have a chance to return to the game, and they will face off against one of the first 4 evictees. And what's interesting with this twist is that when they did it in seasons like Big Brother 3 and Big Brother 6, the person evicted in the week that the twist is happening usually doesn't have a chance to come back. But they did allow in Big Brother 9 for the person to have a chance to come back, which we saw with James. So I guess it kind of balances it out. Anyways, Kalia ends up winning HOH, and of course Danielle is happy, and the 3 remaining vets are nervous, especially Rachel, who thinks that she is going home. Jeff and Jordan lose their trust in Porsche, since she put Jeff and Shelley against one another, and it's the HOH comp where you have to show your cards. But Porsche is fine with it, since Danielle and Kalia will be fine with her now. Rachel is bawling her eyes out, where Jordan and Porsche have to console her. As soon as Porsche leaves the room, Jordan talks about Porsche's move, and Jeff enters, where they mention that it's actually a good thing that they didn't win HOH, since whoever leaves this week will probably come back. Kalia isn't planning on telling anyone anything, and Danielle advises her to listen to what everyone is saying and to make deals with people. Rachel barges in their conversation to talk about Brendan, and she boots Danielle out of the room to talk to Kalia, where she claims that she respects Kalia and offers her a deal for them to not nominate one another. Kalia wants to be receptive to it, but thinks Rachel will come after her anyways, which is true. Kalia speaks to Shelley about her upper middle class background, where she can do anything and she was somewhat spoiled, and she talks about her experience with being discriminated due to her race, as well as the quote-unquote speaking well comments that black people often get, and Shelley also brings up Obama getting a lot of that same treatment. Kalia speaks about how women in color have it even harder, and it's just a nice moment between the two of them. Kalia speaks to Danielle about how she's probably going to nominate Jeff and Rachel, but she wants to make a deal with Jeff to ease the move. But when Kalia speaks to Jeff, it doesn't go well, since he yells at her that he's going after her, though he already was going after her, and Jordan come off horribly during this conversation. Jordan rants about most of the house being flawless doing nothing, and she doesn't want them to be picked off. In my opinion, Jordan hasn't done much this season thus far, and in the future, so the shoe that she's ranting about fits her feet. Kalia tries to align with Shelly, who is telling Kalia everything she wants to hear about forming a final three with them and Danielle, which is a lie on Shelly's part. Kalia nominates Jeff and Rachel for eviction. Rachel provokes Danielle during the nomination ceremony, and the vets think that Danielle told Kalia what to do, and they think it's a dumb move of Kalia's. Shelly has to tell Rachel to calm down and claims that she has more class than this, and Rachel rants about Danielle booting Brennan before the jury to specifically hurt her! Which, whatever. Rachel rants about how people think that she's a bad person, and she wants to quit. Jordan tells her that the others are sheep, and people are really tired of having to manage Rachel at this point. Porsche and Danielle make fun of Rachel's ranting and raving, and Porsche distances herself from Rachel, who is exhausting to deal with, so she's leaning towards the Danielle and Kalia side of the house. Kalia tells Danielle that she wants to leave the game on her own doing, and wants to win based on making moves, where they hear Jeff ranting to the Huskers about knowing where everyone is, and during a line where he and Jordan mention that Kalia is doing Danielle's dirty work. Kalia ends up bawling her eyes out and is getting scared. It is clear that the twist is really affecting her, and the entitlement of the veterans is really bothering her. Shelly reaffirms her loyalty to Jeff and Jordan is losing her mind over Rachel losing her mind all the time. Shelly tells them that she's their Trojan horse, and she's tired of people questioning her loyalty. Jeff ends up winning the veto, and Kalia has to figure out who will be the replacement nominee. Rachel is whining about going home, and Jeff mentions that there's a plan to put up Porsche and to send her home. On the feeds, Shelly actually convinced Kalia at some point to boot Porsche, but they don't show this on the episodes. Kalia tells Jordan that she isn't going to nominate Jordan and is hoping that they can rectify things, so Jeff is not buying it. Rachel makes her plea to Kalia that she won't target her, but will target Danielle if she doesn't go home, but if she does get evicted and comes back, she will go after her directly. Kalia is trying to make bridges with the other veterans and tells Danielle that she doesn't want to send Rachel home due to the twist, and Danielle mentions that she doesn't want to work with Rachel. Kalia mentions that she wants to get out of Danielle's shadow, whose feelings are hurt by hearing this, and she doesn't understand what the point of this week was, and she isn't convinced to keep Rachel. Kalia speaks to Danielle, Porsche, and Lawan about how she doesn't feel comfortable about the game. Lawan offers himself up to be a pawn and to be evicted while he come back and has some special powers. Which, what the fuck? This is so random. Anyways, Danielle and Kalia are happy since they now have an out for the dilemma, and if he doesn't come back, oh well, since they weren't really aligned with him anyways. Jeff takes himself off the block, and Lawan is named as the replacement nominee. Kalia thinks that she gained Jordan and Rachel as allies, and of course the vets make fun of Kalia for her stupid move, which, to be fair, it is really stupid. Lawan thinks that there's a 90% chance he comes back. I don't get how he calculated these numbers. And is thrilled to be nominated, where he is acting his butt off to the other house guests. He mentions that he didn't volunteer, and Shelly immediately picks up that Lawan giving that out means that he really did volunteer himself, where she notices that his vernacular changes when he's lying. Shelly speaks to Kalia about if Lawan volunteered, and she says that he did, which pisses Shelly off since he's acting like he didn't. Shelly reports everything to Jeff and Jordan. Rachel makes a deal with Danielle and Kalia about how she's going to work with them. She is lying, and they all agree with it. Rachel reports this to Jordan about the deal and denies making the deal, and Shelly enters the room where Rachel's rationale makes no sense, and she doesn't trust her. Shelly speaks to Danielle as she gives some information to Danielle about Rachel speaking to them in the HOH room, and Danielle reports to Kalia, which pisses the both of them off, mentioning how stupid Rachel is, where they're thinking about just booting her, since they only want to keep her due to the twist. Lawan is evicted in a unanimous 6-0 vote, and we learn that he has to compete against Brennan. Of course, the viewers voted for the one veteran, and unsurprisingly, Brennan beats Lawan to come back in the house. Lawan really didn't get much screen time, and from the little we did see of him, he was very annoying, quite frankly. People tend to forget that he was in the Regulators Alliance, but because he wasn't immediately targeted for it like the other three, though that's partially due to him not being a big of a threat, he wasn't really in a good position. Even outside of that, he was paired with Kalia, but they were never really aligned, and the vets didn't have any use for him, so he was literally just coasting. And of course, we have to talk about him volunteering to get evicted, not even just volunteering to be a pawn, especially when there's no inclination that he would be good at competitions to even win his way back in the house. In general, Lawan just wasn't good in any sense. Week 6 is a shockingly decent week, despite it involving a returnee who comes back and ends up going home in the same week, and it's kind of a repeat of week 4. And we see a lot more of the newbies this week and their dynamics, which was interesting to me. So Danielle and Kalia are pissed off since they accomplished nothing over their HOH reigns over the last 2 weeks, and it's even worse because all 4 of the vets and their affiliates, meaning Adam and Shelly, are celebrating, especially since Jordan doesn't have to babysit Rachel anymore. Porsche knows that she's on the outs with Kalia and Danielle now, where Kalia rants about America voting Brennan back, and she goes on a great rant about Brennan's annoying voice and jokes. Rachel repeats to Brennan that Kalia and Danielle threatened Rachel last week, and she tells him that Shelly has a final 3 with Jeff and Jordan. And we see a flashback where Shelly is talking about it with Jordan, and Rachel is beside them, assumed to be asleep. Danielle ends up winning HOH. Seeing the 4 veterans get booted off first in this competition was great to watch. The 3 women are thrilled, and the other 6 are pissed off. Brennan knows he's probably going up with Rachel again, but she tells him about a deal that Kalia and Danielle supposedly made with her, and that's they have to try and get Shelly on the block this week. Kalia and Danielle feel good that they were able to recruit Porsche, and they are done with Shelly, since she ditched them as soon as Brennan came back. Adam and Shelly are now kissing her ass, and Shelly asks Kalia to speak to Danielle on her own, and she kisses Danielle's butt even more, which Danielle does not buy. Kalia is annoyed that Shelly kicked her out of the HOH room, and Porsche speaks about how much of a liar Shelly is. Shelly overheard the entire conversation and calls Porsche out about it, and Shelly is starting to have a huge meltdown. Porsche calls out the deal she made with Brennan and Rachel, and a flashback confirms this, and Shelly loses her mind, claiming that it is false. Brennan not only pitches a deal, but for Danielle to nominate Shelly. Danielle nominates Shelly and Adam for eviction, and Shelly starts ranting at the nomination ceremony. Adam is annoyed that he's been nominated for a 3rd time in 6 weeks, and Shelly doesn't even care that she's nominated, but is furious with Rachel lying on her. Danielle tells Shelly that she is not the target and that Brennan really needs to go, which Shelly is fine with, though Danielle says afterwards that she sucks at lying, so that might not have been her intention at this point. Shelly lashes out at Rachel for the non-existent 3-person deal being out of there because of Porsche, and the 2 of them really start going at it. Porsche paints it in a way where she states that Rachel didn't trust Shelly, and Rachel mentions that Shelly threw Jordan under the bus, and Shelly yells that it is not true! It's a pretty good fight, to be honest, and a very underrated one. Shelly is doing damage control with Jordan, where they mention that they know Rachel is a liar, but just needs numbers, which shows that Jeff was prioritizing Shelly and Adam over Brennan and Rachel at this point. Jeff throws the veto since he doesn't want to choose between Shelly, Adam, Brendan, and Rachel. Jordan gives Shelly the phone call from home, remember this for later, and Adam ends up winning the veto. Brendan and Rachel are really worried about one of them, especially Brendan, being nominated, as he's hoping that she stays calm. And Danielle speaks to Jeff about how he is not the target and how Brennan is going, but Jeff tells her that he would prefer Rachel to go, but he would do whatever she wants, since he doesn't want himself or Jordan to go up. Danielle tells Kalia her plan, and they both agree to deny any type of deal with Brenshaw if they throw them under the bus about it. Brenshaw asks Danielle if their deal is good, and Rachel throws Tredef under the bus, mentioning that Jeff is building his own army. Adam takes himself off the block, and Brennan is named the replacement nominee. Rachel cries yet again about him being nominated, and Brendan is not giving up, though they mention that if Tredef flips, he is gone. Brandon pushes the Danielle wants guys out narrative to Adam, since the guys win the vetoes and the girls win the HOHs in the season. Rachel campaigns to Porsche, and she is not receptive to it, like she was when Brendan was nominated 2 weeks earlier. Jeff mentions that he will look at this week to see if he makes the right choice pertaining who to keep, and this aged pretty well since what ends up happening next week, and Shelly realizes that she is not going to be the Trojan horse for Jeff and Jordan anymore. Danielle makes a deal with Jeff and Jordan and mentions that he was her target 3 weeks ago, but that's not the case anymore, where she did make a bad move, but they agree to not nominate one another. Rachel and Brennan speaks to Jordan, and she mentions that she is voting with the house, since Danielle isn't breaking the tie in Brennan's favor, and if Adam isn't voting with them, she can't do anything. Jordan relays the same thing to Jeff, and he tells the couple the same thing, which annoys Brennan and Rachel. Danielle reveals in her HOH chat that she did want Lawan to stay, but Adam was the vote that they needed to get, and he was insistent on booting him, so that adds extra content for last week that wasn't shown on the episodes. Brennan is evicted in a 5-1 vote. For some reason, Brennan came off as a lot calmer during the 1 week he was back compared to the other 4 weeks he was in the season, so he was definitely more likable in that regard. But in general, I really don't have much else to say about him. So, of course, I'm going to be docking him for having to return in the first place after being evicted this season. So, yeah. Week 7 is easily the best week of the season, and it's where it climaxes. So let's just get right to it. Rachel is fine with Brendan this time, and Jeff wins HOH, where Danielle, Kalia, and Porsche are visibly not thrilled. Danielle is hoping that her deal with Jeff will hold her through the week, though Jeff is not very thrilled or receptive to that. Shelley bashes Rachel to the trio since she can't stand her and doesn't like how Rachel is trying to get close to Jeff and Jordan again, despite Rachel being annoyed with them all of last week. Kalia and Danielle are hoping that Rachel somehow goes up and out of the house, which is just a reach in my opinion. Shelley interrupts Rachel's HOH talk with Jordan and intentionally cockblocks it, where Shelley tells Rachel to stop rolling her eyes at her and cutting her down, since it isn't her fault that she was nominated against Brendan, and Rachel was shockingly quiet. Kalia pitches to Jeff that she could be nominated with Rachel, and this annoys him, since he doesn't like people who throw others under the bus when they're in danger, and he tells her that he warned her what was going to happen 2 weeks ago. Porsche decides to speak to Jeff about the game for the first time in 49 days, which he clearly doesn't appreciate, and the conversation is pretty awkward. Danielle tells Jeff that she will throw the veto if she is not nominated, which is a lie, and Jeff mentions that he doesn't trust Danielle to Jordan, but is going to keep her off the block since he doesn't want to piss her off by nominating her outright. Jeff nominates Kalia and Porsche for eviction. Jeff doesn't really care if Kalia or Danielle goes, and Danielle is worried that she could be backdoored. Rachel is prodding Danielle for turning 25 in the house, and it's a really petty argument. Shelley throws the veto since she doesn't want to piss off either side, and we get a bunch of scripted diagrams from everyone trying to zing one another since it's the zing veto. Jeff ends up winning the veto, and he's insistent on history repeating itself, since he's doing all the same things when he was in power on Big Brother 11. Kalia is she's stressing to Shelley that she's going home, and Shelley comforts her, since Shelley knows that she needs to be on good terms with both sides, and she's contemplating turning on Jeff and Jordan sooner than later. Kalia has a feeling that Porsche will be vetoed and Danielle will be the replacement nominee, which is true, and Jeff doesn't tell Shelley or Adam what he's planning on doing with the veto. Danielle and Porsche are pissed off, and Porsche is annoyed that she's come in second in 4 competitions, but doesn't want to kiss butt, but she might have to make a deal with Jeff. Porsche and Jeff make a 1-week deal. Kalia speaks to Jeff to push her deal with not nominating Jordan, while claiming that she isn't a floater like Porsche is. Danielle speaks to Jeff about their deal, but none of these conversations matter, since Jeff vetoes Porsche and replaces her with Danielle on the block. Danielle is obviously pissed off that she is nominated, and Kalia decides to lie low, since she knows Danielle is the target. Danielle starts campaigning to Shelley and knows that Shelley and Adam are the only ways that she can stay, and also uses Rachel being horrible as a campaigning tool. Danielle swears on her grandmother that Shelley would not go up if she stayed and won power, while mentioning Jeff, Jordan, and Rachel are a guaranteed final 3. Shelley mentions these points to Adam, who isn't receptive, which is annoying Shelley, since he's playing for Jordan and not for himself, since he will lose against them in the final 3. Shelley tells Rachel that Jeff threw the veto that sent Brennan home last week, and Danielle told her that. Shelley is doing this since she knows Adam won't vote her way, so she has to get Rachel to keep Danielle. Rachel and Danielle end up speaking about the events of last week, and she gets her confirmation. This leads to an argument between Rachel and Jeff, where she brings it up, since he gets really defensive, which is a clear sign. Jeff makes a snide comment 2 hours before the eviction about Shelley being too much back and forth, and she realizes that he knows of her plan. This leads to a huge argument between Jeff and Shelley hours before the eviction, as Adam essentially sold Shelley out, and Shelley knows about it. Shelley is tired of them talking about her behind her back, and she's trying to deflect everything onto Adam. Jeff calls Shelley out for ratting him out about throwing the cornball veto competition, and for having deals with too many people. Jeff, Shelley, Adam, and Jordan are in the bedroom, and they're all arguing once again about everything regarding keeping Danielle, and Shelley mentions that everyone has had this conversation outside of Jeff and Jordan, because everyone realizes that they don't have a chance against Jeff or Jordan. Danielle is evicted in a 3-2 vote. Danielle was definitely very refreshing this season, especially seeing how she played without the America's twist, and I'm very all over the place with her game. I do think she improved socially since she built many connections with the newbies, and she was close with the veterans before she blew that up, but she was way too pushy with her agenda. She came off as very cold-hearted, which definitely caused her game to be exposed, and she made moves way too soon, and she needed an immunity streak, and as soon as she lost that, she went home. While she was enjoyable in this season compared to 8, I definitely think that it was mainly due to who she was against, as we would see in Big Brother 22, where that isn't really the case. In general, it was interesting seeing Danielle playing without her father during the season. Kalia ends up winning HOH. We see Shelly join up and plot with Kalia and Porsche, and Kalia nominates Jeff and Rachel for eviction because she had a deal with Jordan from week 1, apparently, which I didn't know about. Anyways, Porsche ends up winning the veto and keeps it the same. Shelly and Jeff argue some more during the commercial break, as well as being in there as well, as Jeff tells Adam that he can't rely on Shelly for a vote, but Jeff is evicted in a 3-2 vote, where Kalia breaks the tie. It is interesting that Jeff is giving recaps about his last 24 hours in the house, and they never do that. So they clearly brought him in from the jury house to the diary rooms to narrate, which they never do. But it also shows how highly the production thought of Jeff at the time. Speaking of Jeff, it was interesting watching him this season in the lens of him not being an underdog anymore, which is why he got so much support in Big Brother 11, and seeing how he plays when he's not in power and when he is in power. And you notice that there isn't a whole lot of difference, but I do think his social game improved this season, though a large part of that is due to the dynamics of the returnees versus newbies dynamic. At the same time, I didn't really find him likable. I found him to be very entitled, as he kept on taking it personally when anyone targeted him, because he and Jonah are supposed to spend the entire summer together, like it was the cast's obligation to make sure that happened. And he was definitely very aggressive at several points throughout the season. At the same time, his downfall in the season is one of the best downfalls in the entire season, though watching him in the lens of 2023 is kind of awkward now, and seeing how much they covered for him is, I think it says a lot. Ugh. And now we're at arguably one of the worst weeks in Big Brother history with week 8. I don't even need to explain why, but let's just get to the recap. Shelly is comforted by Kalia and Porsche, and Rachel is shocked that she's still in the game. Shelly and Jordan end up getting into it, since Jordan throws it in her face that she gave Shelly her phone call from home, and this is how Shelly decided to repay her. Jordan is obviously depressed, which turns into anger as she lashes out at everyone for following Danielle. And who gives a shit? Since her season was 4 years ago, who gives if her dad is dick? And it really shows her entitled side, which they always try to hide in her 2 seasons. But even with this season, it was a lot more apparent here. Porsche ends up winning HOH, and she, as well as the other newbie women, are determined to send out the vets. We see a lot more of Jordan and Rachel whining and crying, but we move on to Porsche opening Pandora's box, which is essentially her being forced to open it, which she has later admitted, which revives the pair's twist. How convenient that they decide to revamp it here during the 1 week where the veterans are in the minority and when they're in trouble. As we all know, this week is one of the most rigged weeks in Big Brother history, and this is only the start of it. Rachel and Jordan are paired, Kalia and Porsche are paired, and Shelly and Adam are paired, where of course the 2 vets are extremely pleased. Shelly was set up, and now she knows that her chances are going down. Everyone bashes Porsche for opening the Pandora's box, and the vets realize that they have a good chance to win. And when I mean Shelly was set up, I mean that she was in a very good position. Porsche obviously nominates Rachel and Jordan for eviction, and they mention that Adam and Shelly are floaters who bounce back and forth, so they attempt to make a final four with Kalia and Porsche. Rachel and Jordan make this deal. And Porsche also mentions in the diary room that she wants Rachel to go this week. Shelly is not handling Jordan ignoring her well at all, and she realizes that she made a move to better the life for her husband and child, despite Jordan being America's faves, where Adam claims that she is playing the victim. So Shelly is speaking to Adam about it, and he really doesn't care. So they conveniently bring up the competition that Rachel won earlier in the season that wasn't even a veto comp, but an HOH comp, and they made it into a veto competition. An endurance comp is never a veto competition. So of course she wins the veto for herself and Jordan. Shelly knows that she's going to be voted out since Porsche can't nominate anyone else since Kalia is immune due to being paired with Porsche, and Rachel and Jordan are so happy that they're safe, and they are still pissed off at Shelly for her move last week. Shelly ends up speaking to Jordan and apologizes to her for betraying her, and Jordan apologizes to Shelly for how she behaved as well. Shelly makes a final 3 with Jordan and Rachel, since it will be the 3 of them against Kalia in the next HOH competition, really, since Adam would be voted out if this remains. Jordan and Rachel veto themselves, causing Shelly and Adam to be named as the replacement nominees. Shelly knows that she needs to continue working on Jordan and Rachel, and Adam doesn't know if he's the target or not. Shelly is focusing on campaigning to Rachel, since she knows that she will convince Jordan to vote her way, and she mentions how Adam will not protect Rachel and Jordan, where Shelly gives Rachel her ring to ensure that she will not turn on her. Rachel calls her a manipulator and a liar to her face, but has played the best game, though Shelly reveals in the diary room that the ring is essentially a fake. They make it seem like Rachel and Jordan are contemplating keeping Shelly, and Jordan tells her that if she fools her twice, it is on herself. Jordan asks Shelly if she threw the competitions, and Shelly admits that she only threw the banana one in the beginning, but we have a flashback where she threw the veto a week ago, so that was clearly a lie. Shelly is evicted in a 2-1 vote. Shelly was definitely not one of the more likable people on the season, but she wasn't one of the more unlikable ones as well. And she did lie a lot, which definitely bit her in the butt. Though she started struggling with it here and there, since she taught her daughter not to lie. I do think based on natural skill set, she's probably or arguably the best player of the season, as she was great socially with everyone in the house, and even when she pissed people off, she was able to make up with them. Strategically, she definitely played both sides for as long as she could, though there are definitely one side she was more loyal to. And she didn't have to rely on competitions, and she would have lasted a lot longer if she wasn't screwed over. While it was definitely annoying to see her enable the veterans for most of the season, she realized that she couldn't strike too soon, which was Danielle and Kalia's mistake. Though it did annoy me with Julie trying to paint it out like her booting Jeff is the reason why she was booted here, and not production blatantly manipulating things, so I didn't like that gaslighting. By the time of week 9, I didn't give a crap about anything and I just wanted the season to be over and done with. So let's just get this week crap done quickly. Adam is salty that Clea voted him out, though he outright told her that her vote was irrelevant, and she didn't intend on voting wrong, but Rachel and Jordan didn't tell her how they were voting. Rachel ends up winning the HOH, Jordan obviously feels safe, Adam is going to kiss Vet butt, and Clea knows that she's screwed essentially. Clea attempts to clear the air with Adam, but he isn't really buying it, but of course isn't showing it to her, and everyone knows that Clea and Porsche will be nominated. Clea makes a pitch to Rachel, goes with the tough competitor angle, and hopes that they can make a deal with the 4 girls. Rachel talks to Jordan about what she plans to do with Brendan after the show, and she talks about her high insurance rate because she gets into a lot of accidents, which is clearly a filler scene, since nothing's really happening at this point. Porsche speaks to Rachel, and the latter wants someone who will take her to the final 3, so she and Porsche make a deal, and they kind of reunite their working relationship and their friendship overall. We have a montage scene of Adam consistently talking about toy spelling, and another Pandora's box shows up, which leads to more filler of toy spelling taking the others in a shopping spree, while Rachel is stuck with Jesse. Adam speaks with Jordan and Rachel about how he wants to stick with the vets after flipping on them last week. Jordan and Rachel talk about how they can't be tricked by the newbies, especially Porsche and Clea, so Rachel ends up nominating Clea and Porsche for eviction. Rachel makes it clear that she wants Clea out, but the nominees plot that hopefully Adam can win the veto and they can convince him to use it so they can boot Jordan and keep all the newbies together. Jordan is worried about that very scenario that they just described and is speaking to Adam about him hopefully not using it, but he makes it clear that he's going to stick with the veterans. Adam ends up winning the veto, and despite Clea and Porsche's efforts to get the superfan Adam to make the hugest move in the game, he doesn't use the veto. Clea is evicted in a 2-1 vote, with Rachel breaking the tie. While Clea definitely did have her annoying moments, she is definitely one of the more memorable and stronger newbies in the season. I liked how she did get in good with the vets at first, but she was willing to flip on them and actively was a part of it, but she kind of dug herself into a hole where she had to win or be a part of an alliance that won the next 3 HOHs, and then she was in trouble. But she was able to make the big move of taking Jeff out of the house, was able to have decent relationships with people, and really fought her butt off, so I was really rooting for her. And it's crazy that she would be the last Black woman to do well in Big Brother for a decade until the current era that we are in that started in Big Brother 23. So she definitely paved the way for a lot pertaining to Black women in the game, but unfortunately doesn't get a lot of the credit. Overall, Clea was very enjoyable in the season, despite some of her flaws. Rachel is annoyed that Jordan made the vote a tie, which Jordan did for a jury vote, essentially, and Adam ends up winning HOH. Porsche tries to chat her way off the block to Adam and pushes the newbie angle. Rachel and Jordan make their final three pits. Adam outright tells Jordan that he is going to nominate her against Porsche, which causes Jordan to lash out, since Porsche doesn't deserve to be in the game, and she knows Porsche will vote her out, while claiming Porsche is using her feminine ways. Adam nominates Porsche and Jordan for eviction because he claims that he and Rachel have saved themselves from the block and everyone else has to earn it. Porsche ends up winning the final veto of the season, and we have Rachel and Jordan crying their eyes out, though Jordan knows that she's going home, since she isn't close to Porsche and they haven't spoken in like 60 days. Porsche takes herself off the block and votes to evict Jordan. We definitely saw a more entitled side to Jordan this season, as she was a lot more angry and, quite frankly, a lot bitchier. Though, like Brennan, it was clear that she didn't want to play again, but only came back to help Jeff win. So when that didn't happen, she was just kind of there. While she was close to Shelly and Adam, in some ways I actually found her game a lot worse this season, especially socially, since there are a select amount of people where she actively refused to speak to them for a large part of the season and kind of let the others do the dirty work. And while she did manage to vote for Clea to stay in hopes for a jury vote, Jordan just kind of let the others railroad her HOH, and she was kind of a coaster in her own alliance. I would be lying if I said I enjoyed Jordan this season, and I don't really have much else to say. She was just kind of the same as a player, if not a bit worse, and personality-wise, she was definitely a lot less likable. I don't care about the final week at all, but production clearly got the results that they wanted. Rachel wins part 1 of the final HOH competition, and Porsche wins part 2 of the final HOH. Rachel overall becomes the final HOH and evicts Adam. I will say that Adam is a nice person from what I saw on this season and his social media activity after the season, so this isn't me saying that I dislike him as a person. But as a player, he was definitely very frustrating. While he was on the newbie side in the beginning, it seemed like after that he just kind of clung onto the veterans, specifically Jeff and Jordan, though it was obvious that he was never going to make it to the end had he stuck with that path, and he is a prime example of how production casts newbies like him who are obsessed with certain vets so they can add the numbers in the veterans' favor, which we saw in this season, and this has happened in many other mixed seasons, not only in Big Brother, but in Survivor and other reality shows as well. And what makes it even worse is that he thought that he was going to win if he was in the final 2, but literally no one in the jury respected him as a player, so he didn't even have that going for him. So the group had to agree to 6 questions before the roundtable even starts, and this is another flaw with the live finale having the jury format take place. So Brendan asks Rachel about the stuff that she said to the jurors that were not about strategy, and she apologizes if she said or did anything that hurt people, but she deserves to win due to gameplay, as she was a big target and won competitions. Jordan asks Porsche what else did she do other than cook and wear bikinis in the game, where Porsche mentions that she was forced to have a golden key and played a social game where she got along with everyone in the house and competed in all the competitions she was allowed to compete in. Kalia asks Rachel outside of winning competitions what she did to deserve to win, and Rachel mentions that being on the block 5 times and won the most competitions, and she played differently after Brendan left based on a social game or standpoint, and she kept on bringing competitions, and she said her big move was evicting Kalia. Shelly asks Porsche when she did start playing the game and what was her game moves, and Porsche responds that she started playing on week 1, where Keith messed up her game, and she sided with the vets to accept the golden key and mentioned making game moves, which she didn't explain what they were. Rachel's final speech is about being one of the biggest targets as soon as she entered and was nominated the most, so she had to win the competitions to save herself, mentions exposing Danielle's game early on and booting Kalia while making other strategic moves, reformulating her game after Brendan left, being more social, mentions competing in the same amount of competitions as Porsche but won more competitions while listening to people. Porsche's final speech is about The other 6 people in jury are the ones who voted for her to stay in the first week, mentioned playing in competitions as she won 4 and was second in 4, and played a social game. And the look on Brennan and Jordan's faces, and even Adam's, wasn't complimentary. Rachel wins the season in a 4-3 vote. Porsche in general is kind of just very forgettable and wasn't interesting throughout the season. You can definitely tell that they casted her to be like all the other VIP waitresses, like Diane, Janelle, Rachel, to be more fiery, but we didn't really get that from her. And it didn't help that she had the golden key for the first few weeks of the season. But I think she's a fine enough player, though there are definitely some social holes in the beginning of the season. But she had a bad reputation that she couldn't really shake off, despite her playing significantly better in the second half of the season. But as a player, I don't really know how I feel about her yet. And as a house guest, she was borderline a dud, so yeah. So with Rachel this season, I was expecting this rewatch would have me really respecting her more as a game player and as a personality. And I don't see the change and growth that people mention when they talk about her last season compared to this season. She was still a very emotional player who played very personally, got into conflicts with many other people in the house, and didn't make many strong strategic moves while playing very personally. While she didn't have to win every single HOH like she did in Big Brother 12, she definitely had a lot of things in her favor, like being in a mixed cast, having a group of veterans also being cast with her, and having a few fan people. Though she was one of the people who got Porsche to be close to her, so I'll give her credit for that. And she was saved by a lot of things outside of her control, like Brenna using the veto on her, the twist with the pre-jury comeback, and of course the final 6 where she was put into pairs with Jordan and they gave her the same competition she won earlier in the season. So as a winner, she might be the weakest, but I'll have to go over that with my next video. But Rachel definitely brought some entertaining moments in the season, though she could be equally as frustrating. So yeah. So I don't know if this video is shorter or longer than my Big Brother 12 video, and that says a lot, meaning that I don't care much for the season at all, since all of my other videos are longer than this one and my Big Brother 12 video. In general, this season shows the frustrating element of having a mixed season as how it's inherently more fair for the veterans and unfair for the newbies, where not only do we not get to know most of the newbies on the edit, but there are so many twists and turns that are put there to enable the veterans, who are very unlikable this season for the most part. There are definitely some interesting weeks in the game, and there's some decent drama, so I don't think it's the worst of the worst, but I would be lying if I said I like the season. So with this season and the next season having a set of returnees from the era, it is clear that the post-classic era is ending, and you guys voted for Big Brother 15 to be a part of that, and it's interesting that it'll be the final season as it has Alyssa's sister on it. So I'm looking forward to wrapping up this era and seeing how I feel about the modern era, which those seasons I haven't rewatched at all since their seasons aired, will be interesting. So thank you all for supporting me with my videos. My social media is linked here, and I'll be back with more videos soon. Take care.